Okay, welcome to the first teaching and learning video with myself and Sid. So we're going to talk to you today about questioning, one of the most important things we think in the hard thinking. So first of all, we're going to talk about why we think questioning is important. So Sid, why do you think that questioning is particularly important?
Hi everyone. I absolutely love questioning because, especially when you don't know the students, it gives you an idea of so many characteristics about them. So their verbal skills, their confidence levels, and of course their knowledge levels. So I think it's a really good method for initially assessing brand new students. One of my favourite things about it. How about you?
Well, I think one of the other things is not. I think certainly in high school it's that thing where we always go, we want to know what they know. But I always think the other thing about it is also to make them think, because it's not always just the kid that answers the question. It's also maybe the 25, 26 other kids who are sat there not answering, who have spent a little bit of time thinking, that you want to kind of engage with thinking and make them think alongside the kid who actually answers your question.
Definitely, yeah, it really enables them to start thinking in the background silently, and we don't necessarily notice that, but we probably initiate that by asking a range of questions, don't we? So I think teachers possibly underestimate the power of their questions that they might just ask informally because they are engaging everybody, and hopefully the tone of their voice is also engaging students perhaps at the back of the room. So such a powerful tool to interact with the students. So effective questioning then is probably a lot of categories that we could talk about, but I think the one that we're focusing on, cold calling, is probably my favourite one. I absolutely love cold calling just because I find myself falling back on it naturally, and I don't know if you would agree it's one of the most effective techniques.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, because it means that it's not just the person who you're actually calling on to actually answer the question. It means that every single other person in your class is there having to think about the question. Even though they're not actually verbalising the question, they're all effectively answering the question, even though they're not verbalising it as well. I think actually, obviously, we're going to go through a few different techniques, but effectively, we're going to kind of mainly, I would think, talk about two things. One is the idea of making sure they all think about the question. Probably also the idea of building in a degree of thinking time. Do you think that thinking time's a big part of what you do?
Absolutely. And I think thinking time, we often underestimate how much time is required because the student is processing so many things after they've finished hearing your question. So it's really difficult for us to actually stop talking and think to ourselves, I need to be silent to enable them to think. So it is something that I've had to remind myself many times to say, Sydney, stop talking and just allow the students to think. So I think equally as important as the type of question that you ask is the amount of time that you pose for them to think about their answer.
Okay, so let's have a think through a few strategies then. So, is the idea of no hands up. Okay, so the first thing is obviously naturally, certainly teachers that I've spent many years doing sort of teacher training, is naturally go in, you say, who knows the answer to this question? And obviously, ideally, as we become kind of more professional and we've worked in this career for several years, we get to the idea of thinking, well, actually, we won't do that. We'll go, I'm going to ask the question. And I think from the one page I think we shared from Rob last week, we kind of said, well, actually, we won't do that. We'll pose the question. We'll be in a little bit of time and say, okay, let's think about it, and then we'll choose who answers, so that everyone has to think about the question, and then we'll pick who answers. So it isn't a case of saying who knows the answer. We'll say, okay, you all have to think, and then we'll pick. What do you think about that?
It's interesting actually because I used hands up the other day, although I don't use it for, as you've just explained, questions where you're trying to get an answer out of a student because you're obviously going to get hands up from those who know it or those who are confident, and then others will hide behind it and escape. But I did actually use it to cast votes. So I got students to think about a couple of different options, different answers to a question, and then I asked them to vote on which answer they thought was the most popular. So I didn't ask them the question, but I got them to think about it, and then they could vote with their hands up. So I found a different use for it actually, which I didn't expect to. But generally, I don't use hands up. Obviously, as I said, cold calling is my favourite technique, and I always fall back on that. But I don't know if there's a valuable place for hands up in an A-level classroom. I'm not sure whether you agree.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because obviously, ideally, we want the idea that they would think about the question, then you choose. But you're right. If it's the kind of thing where we're kind of voting, I guess that's the place we would do it. But I think broadly, we want to be choosing ourselves. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so yeah. This one's called Post-it Notes. And I'm actually going to post a little picture here. This is from my classroom from the other day.
Lovely.
This one is one where we were doing, this is Unit 7 of BTEC, where we're looking at, basically we're reading articles and basically pulling from it various different aspects where we had to look at the implications of various different ethical, social, economic and environmental aspects of various different power sources. And the idea was different students would essentially choose different things from the article and pick what they got. Now, to the students, they were saying essentially, I picked this, and they were sharing what they'd done. But really the idea was that they were picking, of the things they looked at, the ones they thought were most important. So it was essentially building in the thinking time of, I picked this, and then think about which was their best answer to make them think more deeply about what they'd actually chosen. What do you think about that?
It sounds really good, and I think you've probably scaffolded the question for them there by giving them a bit of a tool to help with that thinking time. They're not just left to their own devices. They've actually got something onto which they can translate their thoughts, on a bit of paper. And they love Post-it notes, don't they? And I think it's really nice, that visual display that you've created, because it brings the whiteboard into 3 dimensions. So it's going to force them to engage with that table and the way that you've categorised the information. I think it really brings it to life. And obviously it's just another technique that you can use, that you can have in your toolkit. And yeah, I absolutely love that. I'll definitely be using that.
Yeah. Okay. And then now this is one we see a lot in the science department. Now, mini whiteboards. This is an interesting one because having taught in high school for many, many years, this always used to be, from me, a kind of like something that was flashed up in high school of like, here's a quick answer, like a yes, no, true, false, thing like that. But having seen it in the science department, it's been used as a much deeper activity actually to make people think about a bit more deeply. How have you seen it used in science, Sid?
Well, I actually use it a lot for drawing diagrams, particularly in geology. We have to draw quite technical diagrams, including annotations, which show processes. So the diagrams take quite a lot of practice, and geology students aren't necessarily art students, and they really struggle with this concept of, why am I doing a diagram? So I'm trying to tell them you're communicating scientific information. So I think the whiteboard is a really effective tool for that, because they can compare diagrams with each other, they can show them to me, and then I can say, okay, let's add this next stage onto our diagram, and then we all show that. And it gives them an idea of what they're aiming for, and it builds their confidence in practicing drawing for the exam. So I love whiteboards, but I hate cleaning them.
Yeah, no, that's a big look. See, for me, it's have you got enough things to wipe? It says massive
Yeah.
deal. It's the same thing for me. No, I agree, because for me, it's that idea of they've got to spend time. Both, they've all got to provide an answer. So it's the idea they've all got to be engaged, but also, especially at A level, because you move from the high school to A level thing. Often they've got to spend a bit more time thinking about their answer, and this idea of building that thinking time. So they've all got to engage, but also it can be quite a deep answer. And quite often A-level students are thinking, I've got to make sure my notes are perfect. And the whiteboard goes, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. I can think about it. I can do something that could be wrong, but it can also be quite deep, because you've got a lot of time to actually write something that could be, quite a long answer, but it could be wrong. So I can do it wrong. I can think about it. And it doesn't have to be the same as my notes that have to be perfect. It's that difference in that thinking time.
It's a safe space, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a key term. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Finally, I think this is kind of like probably the takeaway. It's that idea of let's build in that thinking time, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm going to jump to the end. The big one, the just pause. It's that thing of like, it's really hard, I think, as a teacher, when you ask a question, you want an answer straight away, and just sometimes go, actually, let's just wait a second. What do you think about that?
It is very frustrating when the students don't give you the answers, or they look startled by the question, because you just want to help them. But it is really important to just pause. It's so difficult, but if you do that and you stick with it, they will start to think, and they will force themselves to maybe turn back in their notes, maybe have a chat with their neighbour and find the answer, because they are capable. You've taught them the information. It's just allowing them time to find the answer. So it's quite scary, but it is really important. And if you don't allow that, you're not helping the students. You're not actually allowing them to improve their skills. So I do think, how I've written in purple there, what is the question asking me is what the student thinks at first. What is my answer going to be? And how shall I say it? Because they're so conscious of the words that they use with each other, not only in terms of their friendship groups, but also the vocabulary that they're trying to convey to you as a teacher. And it's just such a lot for them to think about, and we probably don't notice that. We think that
Yeah.
it's just a question.
No, it's really key that, because we spend a lot of time scaffolding how we want to get written work, don't we? But we don't often think about how we scaffold thinking, do we? And that bit in purple he's written there is key, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
How do we scaffold thinking in the same way that we scaffold written work?
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that's great. So if you want any more tips to help with your teaching, feel free to go, if you work at Ashton, that is, to the TNL Canvas. And if you don't work at Ashton, then feel free to like and subscribe to the video on the channel. Thank you.
Bye.